Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we'll find out about navigating the funding landscape, thanks to our colleagues at MPA. My name is Galina, Events Partnerships and Marketing Manager at Silverstone Technology Cluster. Just before I hand over to Sam and Mike, I wanted to remind everyone that this session will be recorded and shared online later today. Today's webinar will last for about 45 minutes with a presentation followed by a Q&A session at the end. Please use the chat function to submit all of your questions and we'll make sure that those get answered. I also wanted to say thank you to Hexagon, who are sponsoring today's webinar. Hexagon is a global leader in digital reality solutions and combining sensor technology and software technologies. So they make manufacturing a lot smarter and provide some incredible solutions. To find out more about what they do, you can visit their website hexagonmi.com. Now, without further ado, I will hand over to Sam, who will lead today's presentation.
Excellent, thank you. Now, this is always a scary part, because now I've got to share my screen. I hope it goes right. Excellent. So, Mike, give me the thumbs up if you can see presentation. Excellent, brilliant, thank you. So, let me introduce myself first. I'm Samantha Wildman from MPA. I've been at MPA now for very nearly 10 years. And my role really is to talk to businesses. And that's what I do all day, every day. I talk to businesses about the issues they are facing, primarily around innovation and how to fund that innovation. We look at the problems that they're having and how to solve them. And then I have a great team around me that then helps put those solutions into reality. Prior to that, my background is in IT, again, looking at IT solutions for SMEs and large corporates. So I've been heavily involved in the high-tech industry for far longer than I most probably want to admit to. I've been joined today by Mike, and the first thing I have to do is thank Mike. Like many businesses, it's a constant merry-go-round of things that are going on, and Mike very gallantly stepped on last week to help support me because other people got called off onto other things. And so I thank him for that. And also today, he's feeling very under the weather with little voice, and I'm going to make him use it because I've got a whole load of questions that I have for him to answer. But Mike, can you use your voice to start with and give everybody a quick introduction to who you are?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Samantha. So I apologise in advance. I've got not very much voice left before I even start. So yeah, I qualified as an accountant 20-something years ago. I don't really use very much of that anymore, to be fair. Running MPA, which is a professional services firm. So we have a team, a specialist team in engineering, accounting, tax, funding. We have lawyers on staff, HR consultants. So basically any services that SME businesses need at any point in their journey, from startup through to eventual exit. All the problems that a business comes across, we have a solution for. Now, we're confident we say that because what we say is every business is completely unique. As long as you realise that you're all the same. You've got three problems: people, system, process. And everything can be broken down into one of those three things. So we provide specialist support in those three areas.
Excellent, thank you. And there's a little bit of a slide that talk about what we do. Now, looking at the people who are registered, and hopefully the ones that have attended today or will be watching this on catch up. Sounds like a movie star then, don't I? It will be, a lot of you will know us from R&D tax credits, but as Mike said, there's a lot more to what we do, is that whole thing around supporting innovation. And we've just celebrated our 15th anniversary. And, like many of you as businesses, it's about what's the next 15 years? What are we planning to do? And some of the topics that we will go over today will be some things that you'll be thinking about in your future plans. So we've been asked to look at funding options that are available. And, you know, Mike and I will either together do webinars like this on this topic, small work groups, or speak to companies and businesses individually. And this topic can go off on many different tangents based upon what the problems that the companies are facing or what they need to do, and what ultimately their end goals are. So trying to bring it all into one for you now without much feedback, because I can't see all of you. So please, if you've got any specific questions, please do use that chat and put them in the bottom so we can pick them up later. Funding itself is a huge topic, and I'm not going to be able to go through every type of debt funding available, every type of grant. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at them and how they work together and how they can work for your business at different stages of where you're at, and how they fit into the problems that you face as a business. And I've got a question I'm going to ask Mike. It's one that I was going to hang on to sort of further down the line, but I just want to make sure I get his voice while I can. But when we talk about funding, one of the things that often comes up is cash and cash flow. And I know, Mike, you have these ideas, well, not ideas, but, you know, cash flow itself isn't what brings a business down. It's normally a little bit more something else going on in the business that causes the issue of cash flow. So it'd be really good if you spend a minute to elaborate on that side of things.
Yeah, of course. So why we always think cash is important, just to get back to rule-based principles, businesses don't go out of business because they don't make a profit. They go out of business because they can't pay their bills. So cash is your vital source, you know, a vital commodity in your business. But the thing that we always try and get to is the understanding that a cash flow problem doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a cash flow problem. So having not enough cash in your business is actually a symptom, not a cause. So the cash is right at the end of the pipeline. So you've got something wrong further upstream in your business. It's whether you haven't got enough sales, whether you've got too much cost. These are pretty obvious ones. Whether you're not controlling your debtors and your creditors, again, pretty obvious ones. But we've seen businesses get into trouble by being too successful, by letting themselves, you know, by letting a huge contract and then not realizing that they have to put a year's cash flow in up front before they get any payments. So incredibly successful, making a huge amount of profit, but go out of business because they just cannot get to that first payment. So cash is king has always been, you know, the eternal truth in a business. But you manage your cash by managing stuff further upstream. So you don't manage your cash in it and of itself. You manage the rest of your business in order to drive out the result in your cash.
Excellent, thank you. One of the things I'm going to do, sorry, my slides moved forward. I get a bit trigger happy with my mouse. So you know what's coming next. Is we can look at business and what could be a typical life cycle of a business. And this is all very nice and uniform. Like you're going to go through each stage, that you're going to start up with that great idea, you're bootstrapping it, you're funding it yourself, it starts to become a reality, you start to build a product, you're then going out for some early stage investments, and you're going through each step one by one. We're here with STC members. A lot of you are engineers and manufacturers. So, you know, you can also relate that back down to the technology readiness level of where you are at a business. And this will go all the way through and you get to exit. I know Mike has a few opinions on putting exit at the end. It's most probably one of those things that you most probably need to understand right at the beginning, what your aims and your why for the business is, and, you know, planning your exit, because what your each stage that you come to will affect the next stage. So understanding where you want to be at the end will help you have more informed decisions at each stage as you go along. Now, this would be great, and not many businesses work so linear as this. It'd be great if we all could, but as you know, there's humps and bumps along the way. So another way of looking at this is putting it into a cycle, because a lot of the options that are available to you as you go through as a business, you'll use them as different levels, and then you'll do one thing and it will affect the other. So you're constantly rotating through this cycle, aware of what could be coming next to help you make the decision of where you are and keep going. And you can use all these at different levels. So if we start in the top left-hand corner, sort of relates back to the original graph about looking at tax efficient investment. Now, as a startup, you may be aware of enterprise investment schemes. I'll try and explain, or my way of explaining what they are. Jump in if I'm doing it wrong, but my understanding of this, it's a way as a business that you make yourself more attractive to those early stage investors, because you become a tax efficient vehicle for them to invest money in, because their tax returns and the profit that they get out of it is incentivized. So it's a nice way for them to make profits, and you can benefit from it as you go along. And they have parameters set to them about how old the business can be to qualify, and also how much money you can have invested in you at a certain time. But we also see businesses who are maybe 3-5 years old, who maybe think they've gone through the startup stage but never went down the EIS stage, looking at it then because they're still within the parameters for it. So again, it's a really good way to start the business. Annual investment allowances. Now, again, not necessarily at a startup stage. We had a client the other day talking about this on, or I saw it come through last night actually, that doing their R&D claim, we'd identified the fact that they actually hadn't used their annual investment allowance for some of their expenditure. And actually understanding that if they'd used that, the knock-on effect and benefit that they would have from the R&D scheme would also be higher because of some of the losses they could cash in. So it's how these things work with each other. Mike, have you got anything to add on that with regards to the benefits of EIS?
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty neat summary. So thank you for that. Yeah, don't worry about EIS or enterprise investment scheme. None of that actually makes any sense in terms of plain English. What this effectively is an individual can get 30% of their investment back on day one. Now, there is a whole lot, it's a typical thing where government sets out a pretty straightforward arrangement about what they want and why they want it. And then they give it to HMRC, who bring in layers and layers and layers of complexity and rules. So I'm going to say some of these things, but there is always caveat. So 30% tax break, which you're entitled to on day one, and you can get pretty much on day one. There's a difference between that and the seed scheme, is the seed scheme is much smaller, but it's 50% on day one. And the idea of that, friends and family, as we call it, is it protects your friends and family more. So if they give you £10,000, they can get £5,000 of it back straight away from the tax man. If the business doesn't do what it's expected to do and it fails within 3 years, then you can, depending on your tax situation, you can get about another 40% back again. So somebody under the standard EIS scheme can get about 70% protection on their investment for the business failing in the first 3 years. Friends and family get about 90%. So Aunt Maud, who gives you £10,000, gets £5,000 back of it on day one. And if you don't manage to get what you want out of your business, she gets about another £4,000, or could get another £4,000. So she's only risking 1,000 of her 10. So they are incredibly generous schemes, and the idea of it is that the UK government wants individuals to invest in business, because rather than sitting in the bank and earning, well, God, pennies in interest, what they're doing is they're getting that money out of the banking system and giving it to companies to generate more wealth with. And obviously an economy that's got a thriving SME sector means there's more VAT being paid, there's more corporation tax being paid, there's more employment, there's more employment taxes being paid. So HMRC are happy to give away 30% on the nose on the basis that they will get rewarded for that down the track from a successful business.
Excellent, excellent. And then when you've gone from raising the money through these type of investments, and you get to different stages of business, you may be looking at how else that you can raise money. Now, grants are a great start. As a small business, as a startup, there may be business grants that you'll go through. You go through the cycle, you may come back again, you may look for innovation grants. Grants, especially innovation grants, Innovate UK Smart grants, are very, very competitive. They're not free money. You know, you really, really have to work for them. They're there to support businesses who are doing ground-changing technology, ground-changing innovation. Over the last couple of years, people have decided with extra time they're going to diversify, or they've needed to diversify the business. And I take loads of calls from people saying, I want a grant. Great. What do you want it for? And how much do you want? Well, I don't know, but how much can I get? They don't work like that. They are a great way to invest in your innovation, but you've got to have a very, very solid business case, a really solid plan, understand your innovation, how it's going to work, how are you going to put it together? What's your market? It's no point saying, oh, it's a 10 billion market. If I have 10% of it, I'll be a millionaire. Well, what 10% do you want? How are you going to target that 10%? So all of these sort of things that you need to be able to put together for a grant. Also, there are some downsides to grants. Say that your project needed 200,000. As an SME, you would be expected to match fund some of that. And that could be between 30 and 50%. So you've got to be able to find, possibly up to £100,000 of that money yourselves. You've also got to be able to float your innovation for the first quarter. These are paid quarterly in arrears. You've got to be able to prove that you can afford that first quarter, or maybe a little bit longer by the time you put your paperwork and your submission in for approval for the funding. We're also seeing some changes coming down the line. Some of these changes are consistent in a lot of the government schemes. The fact that you've got to be doing the work in the UK is a major one. These government strategies are about making the UK an innovation powerhouse. How are they going to do that if they're giving you money to employ resources elsewhere? So there's this big drive around it being UK focused staff and innovation. Big thing that we've seen over the last couple of rounds of the grants is a big factor of it now not necessarily just being around the game-changing technology, but what are your plans for commercializing that? And Mike, if you've got a voice, I know this is sort of your understanding of why they're looking for that commercial side, what the benefit is, not just to your business, but to the economy as a whole.
Yeah, of course, I'll give it a go. So the grant landscape, I think, is ever changing, ever evolving, and it comes off the grand plan that was announced a couple of years ago now. I think the decarbonisation and move towards an older population and general mobility. So those are the three key themes. And if you can find one, or ideally all three of those themes, and hit them with your idea, then you're onto a much better chance of getting it. But what HMRC are really keen on finding, HMRC, beg your pardon, Innovate UK are really keen on finding is how are you going to commercialise that? So no problem at all. We'll give you £250,000. When do we get it back? So when does UK PLC see the benefit of me giving you £250,000 now? And if what you're doing is theoretical research into a particular area that you could have a commercialization, but we're not quite sure what it is yet, or we've got 4 options and depends on the outcomes, it's going to be much, much harder to get your grant. So it's really about nailing your business plan. How are you going to commercialize the funding, the research that you're doing now, and when are they going to see the fruits of that? So give you £250,000 now, when are you going to start to employ people? Not to do the research, but in terms of when you're going to employ people to make the product or deliver the service, and who gets it, how much tax are you going to pay effectively? So it's much more about how you're going to commercialize it. It's not just about, have you got a really good idea? Does it hit the 3 strategic heads? In terms of where Innovate UK want to take the UK PLC, how do you commercialize your idea? What's the reality of your business plan? And give you an idea, 1 in 10. Yeah, if businesses putting in their own Innovate UK grants is about a 1 in 10 success rate. But that's why we say it's not free money, because you've got to do 10 of these to get 1. Unless you happen to love filling in forms, it's quite a painful process. And typically your success rate with 1 in 4 if you go with a specialist provider. So that's the difference.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But again, they are a brilliant way to help you fund or make your innovation spend go further. But you have to be able to, you've got to put some skin in the game as well. The other thing around funding option is that sort of difference between debt funding and equity funding. Neither is right or wrong. It very much can depend upon the situation that you're at for your business. So going out for equity funding very early on, you may have to give away more equity for your business because of business valuation. If you are able to hold out to your business has a higher value, so you've maybe got to the next stage of your business life cycle, and you can do that through some debt funding options. When you go to equity, you're going to give away less of a stake of your business. So it's understanding how these things work for you as a business and when's the right time to bring them in. I'm going to touch on debt funding a little bit more when we maybe look at some of the other tax support and incentives. But when we were doing these talks sort of a year or so ago, when we were looking at venture VC funding and equity funding, there was a lot of money in the marketplace to invest in those high-tech businesses. But I think, as we're seeing at the moment, as interest rates are going up, the amount of money that's available for investment seems to be going down. Those sort of fintech and startups, we're seeing less money available. I think Crunchbase was saying that over the last year, the amount of VC money out there has reduced by 27%. And not just in the UK, that's globally. And within Europe, I think they're saying it's gone down about 38%. So maybe some of that speculative type of investment, where you're sort of starting to see the VCs now going back to sort of the old patterns of what they know and what the data is in there. It doesn't mean that there isn't investment out there. We're still seeing some really, really good success stories, but it's like everything, it's about that due diligence behind it. So what the and mitigating the risk, just like within the grants, that's what's sort of being looked for again in that sort of equity, that VC world. So again, it's about having that data and that plan, and your commercialization and where it all fits in is sort of more and more needed. Lots of different types of debt funding, from business loans to other grants support out there as well. So again, quite a bit of a minefield topic, but it's about getting the right advice to use what at the right time to achieve your goals and how they affect on everything else. I wasn't going to ask you a question on that, Mike, but if you wanted to jump in, then you can. But I'll go on to the next section.
I'm sorry, Dad, I'm just going to add about with VC funding or any kind of equity-based funding, it's risk versus reward. And you need to look at that risk-reward pattern from both sides. So what's your risk and reward? So why do you want this particular VC or any VC in your business? That is somebody with a 20% stake in your business going to act like a majority shareholder. Obviously that's a huge risk. You can control it with a legal contract, but my reality is if you have to get your legal contract out every time you have a conversation with a business partner, you're kind of already lost. So it's really about finding the right fit in the people, and that should be a conversation that's two-way street. So it's a two-way flowing thing. Are they the right investor for you? What do they bring? And I don't mean just bring money. What else do they bring? So are they an expert in your industry? Do they hold a really good black book? Do they have a really good network? Have they got complementary companies in their portfolio which will help you develop now or could be particular potential sales outcomes? So you should be testing them just as much as they're testing you. So it's not just about money from them. Your risk and reward should be much more about, what's the fit of this person or this group of individuals into my business.
Excellent, thank you. So if we go into the next section, tax support. Now, I need your voice back, Mike, because I know you like your soapbox on this one, but we can start looking at patent box. So patent box is a way of securing your profits from your innovation. So unfortunately, Mr. Dyson isn't on the webinar today, but if he was and he had a patent on his air filter, his whole vacuum cleaner, we could look at the profits that are associated to that, apply it through patent box, and his corporation tax on that patent will go down to 10%. Now, with corporation tax changing as we get into April 23, with it going on the sliding scale up to 25%, that is a massive opportunity to take your profits or take more profits back into the business to help future innovation. Because one of the things we've learned from innovators and entrepreneurs is this constant cycle of innovation, so a way to fund the future. But patent box has been around since 2013, I think, but the take up is very, very low, and maybe not, Mike, it'd be really good if you've got some voice to talk about why you think it hasn't really been taken up on maybe why it should.
Yeah, of course, as you say, this is one of my soapbox moments. I find this really frustrating. It's an incredibly powerful tax break, and it really needs a mindset shift. Sorry, my voice is starting to really break up. As Sam said, it takes your corporation tax down to 10%. So from 19 to 10, halving it. So it's quite a nice benefit. Taking it from 25 to 10, it's a massive advantage. What you're doing is you're keeping that 15% in your business. So it's a huge opportunity. If let's say your 15% it is £15,000. So you're making 25k profit. So not a huge 25k tax, so not a huge number, but that £15,000 you get for the 20-something years life of your patent. So look at it as a £350,000 inward income, inward cash to your business. With that proposition, here's 15 grand every year for the next 25 years. So SMEs need to look at this differently. So there's around 1,000 people a year claim patent box, and 750 of those are large corporates. So Dyson's, Glaxo, BT's, AstraZeneca, it's all those big companies that you know have got patents. 300 SMEs claim. If you look at the 4.5 odd million SMEs that there are in this country, 250,000 of those already have patents, but 300 claim. Why is that? That I don't get. So, you know, this is money available to an SME if they're making a profit that they should be taking. They shouldn't be overpaying their taxes to HMRC. They should be keeping that cash in their business and doing stuff, you know, good stuff with it. So that's one part. But the other part of it for me is, why aren't more companies getting patent? And I think it's because SMEs are scared of the word patent. What they hear is, you should get a patent. And what triggers in their mind is, okay, it's 30 to 50,000 pounds of the cost, and it's going to be 18 months to 2 years of dealing with a lawyer, and I don't want to do any of that because it's just too difficult and too expensive. So it really needs a mindset shift. So there are two mindset shifts, one which we've achieved, which is to get patent attorneys to think differently. So rather than trying to patent something to say, okay, I'm going to stop anybody else in the entire world using anything that looks like a rubber band, because that's their starting point. How can I stop anybody on the planet infringing my elastic band patent? What we should be looking at is the other end. We should be saying, what's the smallest engineering load? What's the smallest intellectual loading we can get into the patent? So I'm going to use my elastic band for holding a widget together, and it's such a specific widget and nobody cares. So that's what we have to patent right down at that end, not to stop anybody using elastic band. It's to stop an elastic band being used to stop this widget rattling. So it's a much, much tighter patent. So the patent attorney is making a smaller patent deliberately. Makes it much easier to get and much easier to prosecute. So you're looking at £3,000 to £5,000 and 9 to 12 months to get them through the patent office. So SMEs need to look at patents as a tax planning tool, not as a business protection tool. Of course, it will give you some protection, but the key component here is tax planning and cash flow management. It's not stopping anybody else on the planet using an elastic band. So, you know, we've got that one headset change. We now need SMEs to understand what's going on here and come and join this party. Because using patent box first to, you know, crush your profit down to 10%, and then using research and development to eliminate that other 10%. So basically, you can basically you can get away with paying no tax, no corporation tax, completely legitimately by using these two schemes together. How many SMEs would like to pay no corporation tax? I don't understand why the take-up is so low.
Thank you, Mike. You now may step down from the soapbox. Sorry, it was a bit of a joke. Mike alluded to R&D, and I'm going to mention it. And, you know, I know unless you've been living under a stone for the last, you know, 20 odd years, you will be aware of it. But it is still a very fundamental part of the government strategy, and there's still very ambitious targets of trying to achieve a 2.4% spend on research and development against the UK's GDP spend. We're not there. We haven't been there for a long time. We are still, as a country, we are still very much below a lot of our counterparts globally and in Europe. You know, we're not even near the 2%. So there's still a big emphasis on increasing the amount of spend that we do as a country on R&D, because the correlation between economic growth, I can't talk now, you know, is really important. So there's been some changes. Some of them have gone through already. A lot of them are coming through. And these changes are around how we make the R&D scheme more efficient. Oh, I've lost a slide. There we are. How we make it more efficient, and how, as a UK, for each pound of money that we spend on the R&D tax credit scheme, that we're getting more than that pound back into the economy. So there's been a whole thing around tightening up the R&D scheme. If any of you put a claim in the last 6 months, you've most probably had to wait a lot longer for your payout. And that's because HMRC had to stop processing claims for a while, because there was, you know, some very strategic abuse going on there that they had to go and look at. But also they've got to look at how they do their standard compliance and how they do their standard due diligence checks to make sure that the right businesses are claiming R&D. We've seen over the years that the definition of R&D has diluted quite a lot to what is actually an advancement in science and technology. So that's one area that HMRC are really focused on. And they're putting some things in place to help with that. We can look at the UK focus. We mentioned it in grants, but again, they're wanting the UK R&D money to be going to businesses who are investing in UK skills. So if you've got to subcontract any work out, they want that to be to UK companies. So you're not being able to subcontract to abroad. One or two very specific circumstances when you can, you have to. If you were doing some work in the Amazon rainforest and you had to have researchers that were there, then maybe you can. But for, you know, general IT work, they're not looking to pay for other countries to have the skill sets that they want to have in here. Making sure that your claim is genuine and correct. So naming your advisor, both your advisor and yourself, taking ownership of your R&D claim, signing it off, making sure that you both agree and you both approve something that they're looking at, which will be coming in. The pre-notification of claims, as I said, everybody knows about R&D. Your business may change and your need to claim R&D may change as you go on, but the business owner now should be aware of it. So they're stopping people from being able to say, oh, actually, I think I did R&D 2 years ago. I've never claimed before. I want to put a claim in. What they're now saying is, if you believe that you've done R&D in that year and you haven't claimed before, you need to actually be given us a pre-notification that you're claiming. And that has to be done within a set period of time after your year end. So it's stopping accidental R&D as such. If you're claiming already, you've been claiming for a while, that's fine. You're already in the system, you don't have to pre-notify. I'm going to leave one bit to last on EPWs. I'm going to ask Mike to talk about that. And it's quite funny when I read other people's articles and what they're talking about. It's one of the areas that always get glossed over because people don't really understand it. There are some positive things that are going in. HMRC are proving that they're keeping up with the times and how innovation is changing. So some grey areas around cloud and data being sorted, and R&D around cloud, the use of data and the use of mathematical formulas are allowed to be included. Obviously, the emphasis is on about the technical advance that they are generating, but they are now costs that can be, if relevant and eligible, can be put into a claim. EPWs, extra provisional workers, sort of quite often get in the group of subcontractors, but it's people who work with you under your guidance on part of your development project. Normally, people who are self-employed under their own business, those type of people. Now, there's now some restrictions on that. My understanding, Mike, is that you can include EPWs at the rate of their PAYE that they are getting paid elsewhere. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this is But again, there are a couple of things in the theme in pretty much all the different funding landscapes, and that's really about supporting UK businesses, supporting UK PLCs, so keeping the cash inside the UK. I'm going to say this all out loud. I don't think not being able to go back, the pre-notification of claims, I don't think that's going to survive a legal challenge, because you have a right to change your corporation tax return for 2 years. Now, pre-notification of claims is driving a coach and horses through the middle of that ability to change your corporation tax return. So I think they've probably overreached there. I completely get the point, but I don't think that will survive a challenge. Sort of the specific question, EPW. So this goes hand in hand with another piece of legislation, IR35, which people may well have heard of, especially in the public sector. So this is off payroll working. So again, what HMRC is doing on the government's behalf really is to try and keep money in UK PLC. And part of that is, fill the exchequer up with tax pounds, sorry. If you're giving your money to a contractor and they are taking their money out of their own company in a very tax efficient way, then HMRC don't feel that they're getting the appropriate amount of tax from that individual. And they're doing it because they've got round the system. So IR35 is designed to force workers onto payroll. So there's an extra piece in this legislation that backs that up. So if you're an EPW, you're a contractor effectively, but you're a specific kind of contractor. If you are being controlled by, if that contractor is being controlled by you, they're effectively coming into your workplace and they're a bum on seat in your workplace, and you're controlling them like you would any other person in your business, IR35 probably kicks in, and they should be on your payroll. To stop you claiming R&D, their HMRC is saying the maximum of that individual's payroll tax is the most you can claim. So if that EPW has got their own little private sector, private company, and in there they're taking £8,000 salary and the rest is dividends, they're not paying any payroll taxes, you can't claim. So what this is, it goes hand in hand with IR35 to try and force people onto payroll.
Yeah, and the reason why we've included this into funding, because we know how important R&D funding is for business and tax credits that can get back. So understanding how these changes are going to affect your claim going forward for year ends after April 23 is going to be really important to understand. Can you claim for subcontract? Do you have a whole load of subcontractors abroad? What's going to be that impact? Should you be looking at changing that into the UK? What's your relationship like with EPWs? How does that work? Do you need to be looking at those contracts and taking an understanding of those, and understanding again how they will work for you? And again, being aware that HMRC are taking longer to pay out. I know some companies have gone to debt funding for that. Slightly on the fence if that's always a good solution, because you're paying interest out. But debt funding from R&D can be a positive if maybe you spend a lot on R&D and you get a big tax credit back, when you can look at that 6 months into your financial year end and borrow against, or into your financial year and borrow against that before you're able to put your claim in. And what you're then doing is you're basically spending your R&D money twice in a year. And again, it's all down to the return on investment, because obviously there is interest to pay. But if you're able to use that money to better reward for you by spending it twice in a year and accelerate your innovation program because of it, then debt funding could be a good option for you on there. Now, Mike, as always, we're speeding through time, or we're sort of at that 45 minutes. I'm going to just head on to the next slide. We've got some other bits that we can talk about, but I wanted to wrap up this area as a whole. in that funding cycle, we've talked about a support network. You know, we're here today because of the SDC, which is a great way of bringing businesses together, so you get support from each other. You know, that could be mentoring and coach support from your peers, or from experts, you know, like we've been called in today. But all these things within the funding cycle require thought and planning and data, and that's why having that network around you is really, really important. We talked about there are so many different grant options available. Your trade association or your local enterprise may know what's available in your area or in your industry, or help to lobby government for it. What you've then got to do is then use your other professional services expert to understand, actually, if I go down that route, what's the knock-on effect? How will that work? You know, if I take a business loan or a business grant out early, but I haven't specified what it's going to be used for, is that going to have a knock-on effect to what I can claim R&D for? Actually, yeah, keep hearing about patents, could look down that route, but I'm so busy. At the moment, I'm not really imagining that profit coming in, I'm loss-making. Actually understanding, if I invest that little bit of time and effort now into that patent, I have massive savings coming down the line for future, and I can fund future innovation. So it's understanding how all of these sort of things working together. And as you keep going on in that cycle, what's the next thing you take up? You know, do I start with EIS? Do I then go and get some funding? Do I then get some debt funding? Do I get venture capital? You know, and how does it all actually just keep that motion going and moving forward? I don't know if we've got many questions coming in, or if we can talk for a little bit longer on certain things, but there was a couple of things that we wanted to talk about, and some of this was around future and planning. Again, it fits back into that cycle about making sure you understand your goals, where you're at. We can talk about this on another, on another talk. What are your problems? How can you solve your issue? We talk about funding. How can you solve your issue of trying to employ staff? Certain staff with certain skill sets come at a premium. How can you afford that at an early stage? How can you get those right people in? So what tools could you use? Things like share schemes, and how you can incentivize and attract people in. So there's lots of stuff that we can talk about there. So did you want to carry on, or were there some questions that we can answer?
Hi, Sam. We've got a few questions. We can give you another 5 minutes to wrap up if you want, and we'll do questions after that. Would that work for you?
I was just going to take a couple of minutes to sum up, really, if that was okay. And that was, if you could just, there's partly these, which are really important. Can you go back one slide, please, Sam? Thank you. Now, there's, what, 20 odd headings there. And that, to be honest, is the summary of the funding options available. There's probably closer to 100, if not more, different types of funding that are available for a business. It's an incredibly complicated landscape. And I would say that, if you take one piece of advice out of today, it's challenge your professional advisor or advisors, because they should be the expert in this. So they should be helping you formulate a plan for your business, formulate a strategy, and then work out which of these component parts fit best for your business at which time. And you should have a plan for it. You should know what you're going to do next year. So if you think it's VC funding is your option, and you're thinking, yes, VC funding is the way I want to go, prepping for that is 2 years in advance, is your reality. You need your business plan 2 years before then, and to have set it out and hit every milestone on it, because that's what they'll be asking you. But you also need the next 5 years. How do they get their money back? That's just one simple component of any external funding. they're always going to look at your plan. But say really complicated landscape, and with the greatest respect, you need to run your business. So go away and run your business and let a professional help you with this bit. So, I've said it twice, I'm going to say it a third time, just to make sure. Challenge your professional advisors, your accountants, your lawyers, your bankers, whoever they are. They're the experts in this. So you need to get into their head. They need to help you plan.
Excellent, thank you. I think our slides were being shared afterwards, and we did have some bits on planning, what planning's involved, and about taking a little bit of time to work on the business, not just in the business. I was going to ask you, Mike, how you solved that, but maybe that could be a question that somebody might want to throw in. And then I think everything back to the funding cycle, and then the fact that that planning could also be very important for a recession, because all the news says that it's coming around the corner. But if you've got some questions, I'd love to throw them over at Mike.
Thank you both. That's been really helpful. We've got a couple of questions, so I will start with the first one. Can you go for EIS at any stage in the business life, or does it has to be set up at the start?
Again, it's one of these things where I think I said at the beginning, UK government has decided on a direction how they want to do it. And then they hand it to HMRC, who have got to be the worst people to hand it to, quite frankly, because for them, it's about prevention, it feels. For them, it's about, cash is a one-way street. It all comes into the exchequer in taxes. And the higher that number is, the better. And to some extent, for UK PLC, that is the right answer. But unfortunately, it is incredibly complicated, and it will be an hour on its own, just talking about the rules. Really broadly, if you're in your first 5 years, you can get EIS. If you're in your first 2 years, you can get seed EIS. That's, I'm painting with a really, really wide brush. There is a provision that you can, if you pivoted your business. So you go from window cleaning to decide to do health tech, for instance. I know it's an extreme example, but that pivot would allow you to effectively say, I've got a brand new business. And then your 2-year, 5-year clock starts running again. The rules are really, really complicated, which is why I would say challenge your advisor, or Sam's details are there. Ask Sam.
Thank you, Mike. We do have another question, which is around who helps businesses understand where the patent opportunities are within a business. I think you've briefly touched upon that, but maybe if you can just give a few more ideas and advice.
Who helps? So the only person that can really do that is a patent attorney. Now, we've got very capable engineers on staff, and the engineers, while they're doing other things, will bump into these as they go along and go, oh, that's an idea, you could patent that. Or you could do a registered design right. You could put some form of protection on it. Registered design rights are great in and of themselves, but the patent is the only thing that unlocks patent box. But it has to be a patent attorney. If a patent attorney wants to charge you for that discovery visit, you've got the wrong person. So they should be giving you an hour up front for you to basically lift up some stones in your business. Take them around all 4 corners of your workshop, your office, whatever it happens to be, to explain what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. And they should be asking you the right questions to lead you down the path to find the patent. And that's an hour of their time. And that should be their discovery meeting, and that should be free of charge. If they're charging you, they're the wrong guys. And again, we can introduce you to people. So again, Sam's details are here.
I think one of the other things that you should be doing as a business is you should be, when you are at that drawing board stage of anything, you should have that person in the room who keeps putting their hand up and saying, could we patent it? Could we patent it? And just having it in your mind, because it's not always at the forefront. So think it's a really important question to just keep asking yourself. And some of it you'll know that, oh, yes, well, we could, or don't know, could we? And then go off and get the advice. But you need to be asking yourself at every level of new innovation, or also when you're taking something and you're enhancing it, just keep asking yourself that question: have we considered patents?
Thank you both. We do have a comment which we could probably do with a bit more explanation on your behalf. In regards to patents, some of us feel that the fear in protecting it could be very costly. So if you need to take legal action, the main concern for a lot of people is the cost of legally protecting those patents. Is that something, what is your view on this, and what would be your advice?
With the patents we're talking about getting here for tax planning will typically be much narrower than a patent designed for full-out protection. So they're much easier to defend. That's the first bit. The second bit is you can get patent protection insurance. But if you're buying that insurance right at the beginning, before you've had any challenges, it's not too expensive. And you can buy it for the lifetime of the patent. So with that insurance, basically the legal fees are insured.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got a couple of other questions that we could possibly answer as we've got a few minutes. Is patent box the same as applying for a patent?
So
No.
yeah, no. So patent box is the tax saving vehicle that you can use if you have a up-to-date UK or EU patent that is still active, and if you're profit making, which is another major thing from a patent point of view, because there's a corporation tax saving. So yeah, patent box is the corporation tax saving side. Patent is what you file with the patent attorney.
Thank you, Sam. That's great. Do you foresee any changes to the Innovate UK Smart Grants or R&D schemes coming out?
Yes.
That's a very definite yes. Please tell us more.
The R&D scheme has been made more generous at every change up until this last point. And this last set of changes have made it narrower. And it's the first time it's been narrowed in its 16-year history. I suspect it will be made more generous financially in the next, when the rate goes up to 25%, what normally happens is they adjust the percentage that you can claim down, so you get the same amount of money. So when the corporation tax rate was reduced, your qualifying percentages went up. So you got the same £100,000. I suspect when the corporation tax rate goes up to 25, they will reduce it, but not completely. So it will be made more generous. So that's the one thing I suspect. I think that, you know, the scheme came under significant attack from organised crime earlier in the year, and HMRC will continue, quite rightly, to push really hard on falsified claims. We see them on a daily basis, and some of them are just absolutely outrageous. You know, a body shop putting cars back together again to BMW specification. Apparently they got £100,000 of the tax back for R&D tax credits. It's not their R&D, it was BMW's. So zero. They should have had absolutely nothing, and they got £100,000 and done for the last 5 years. So where they are at the moment is when that's found, they have to pay back the £500,000. They have to pay interest on the £500,000, and the penalty will be another £500,000. That will kill that business in one go. So, you know, regulation is really important. We have to, you know, your advisor should be getting you the maximum entitlement they possibly can, but they should also be an advocate for HMRC. They should make sure that HMRC rules are being applied properly. So I think the scheme will get tighter and tighter to basically push out all these fraudulent claims. And we reckon a third of claims. Given the number that we see, we reckon it's a third of claims that are fraudulent. So yes, and patent box just needs to be publicised. Really, more people need to be in it. You know, £250,000 patents out there that are active right now. Why isn't there £250,000 with the claimants?
Thank you, Mike. That's great. I think, sadly, we haven't got time for any further questions, but if any of our attendees would like to find out more about certain topics, please feel free to get in touch and we'll make sure that your questions get sent to our presenters. So I would like to say a big thank you to Sam and Mike for your time today. It has been a very insightful presentation, and I'm sure that our events have gained some really useful knowledge. I also want to thank all of our attendees for joining us today. It's been great to see so many of you. And just before you leave, we would really ask you to complete one of our polls. Your feedback is really important to us, so please let us know what you think. Finally, please do visit our STC website if you want to register and find out more about our future events and what we've got coming up. There's some interesting sessions coming up in the next couple of months. And with that, I will say thank you again and have a lovely rest of your afternoon.